Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who's saving up some time units for a rainy day.
Tim Longo. I wish I could.
I know you do.
Bank them or something. Ooh, man.
I think we were talking in pre-show a little bit about opportunity fire, and I'm starting to be of the opinion that you have to have some left in order to get snapshots off when things come into range or whatever.
Yeah, I agree, because I am missing, I had literally a guy walk right in front of my, he was surrounded, and the alien, and he just walked right through us.
And nobody took a shot.
No, I haven't had an opportunity fire shot in quite a while, actually. And I was actually looking through the manual. I just must have missed it multiple times. I was trying to find that answer. Maybe I'll do a little web searching on it. But yeah, I think so too. That's probably what those buttons really are for. In the lower left with the reserve time units.
Move into a position and reserve enough for
that
such and such. That makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah. And so there's probably
it probably works if you leave enough anyway.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But if you don't,
because I've definitely seen some opportunity fire, but,
I don't know how much. It's funny that they don't have a chart in the manual about how much. I guess it's so variable. Maybe they can't about how many things. What actions take what time units. Because kneeling seems to take 4.
Yes.
By the way, you might have read this, but if you're kneeling and firing, your accuracy is higher.
Yes, I believe that was in the tutorial.
Yeah, and then I was just going through the details of the ground missions because I was having so much trouble. And then the other one that I noticed in there that you may already know is if you're firing a two-handed weapon and you have something else in your left hand, then the accuracy goes down.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Like a pistol or a grenade or something, I guess. So if you're firing a rifle or a rocket launcher and there's something else. Anyway, that's what they imply.
That makes sense. I wondered if that was the case. I realized that we didn't introduce that we're still talking about XCOM UFO Defense. And for those who have listened this far and been wondering what we're talking about, it is in fact that.
Yeah,
but
we're jumping right in.
It is the third episode. We don't need to spend as much time introducing what we've been playing. The goal this time was to get 6 months into the game, so to July 1st. And my understanding is that both of us failed miserably, and for different reasons.
I did fail my terror mission, but then I reloaded, and I just finished January when I did that.
Nicely done. I made it to the end of February, but I did start over.
Yeah,
which was something you had done prior to the last session.
Yeah.
And I had a lot more time invested in my initial game, but what I realized was I had spent a lot of time on doing the interceptor tutorial and then separately doing the research tutorial or the base management tutorial. And I realized that meant I wasn't doing those two things in parallel in my original game, and I felt a little bit behind the curve technology-wise. Mm-hmm. So, just as I was getting into my second terror mission on my original play, I realized I'm only now getting some of my first research things and getting things produced. I had my motion sensors, I think, were one of the first things I researched. And this time, I had a number of things already by the time I got to my second terror mission, which happened in the middle of February or so, 3 weeks into February, I think. So I'm doing much better. I feel much more confident about my approach, but I did also feel like I needed to take another stab at the whole game because it is so difficult, and I felt like that might be the difference between me being able to finish it ever or not.
Yeah, I mean it's not forgiving on that. So I mean it lets you just kind of keep playing if you're making bad, of course, bad decisions with your tech tree, and it's not shy about you you've researched or not researched your way into a hole, and there's nothing you can do about it. It seems like
that's an interesting phrase as far as a series of decisions, because it's Sid Meier, who makes games that are very similar to these, to this one, who says game design is proposing to the players a series of interesting decisions. That's his thing, and that feels very true of the Civ series for certain, and really for any Sid Meier game. But I also feel it here that I'm constantly making decisions about what I'm willing to live with more than anything else. Am I willing to live with the fact that this character died, who I knew I had already leveled up a bit, but I managed to kill that spaceship drone thing that's been driving me crazy. My Singapore mission ended up being just those and grays, sectoids, I think they're called. And
I haven't seen
so I had to constantly make the decision, like, is it worth trying this over in order to preserve more lives, or am I getting off easy only losing 3 or 4 soldiers?
Yeah.
I'm constantly trying to figure out how to thread that needle, like how far is too far? And that's an interesting, tense decision to be making in play. For the purposes of the cast, I'm trying to keep some forward momentum, but obviously I'm failing, and so are you. But so there's that tension that just naturally comes from that the time pressure of us playing. But there's also just the not knowing how much loss is okay, and trying to make the right decision to balance that as well as I can with my other goals. It's tough and fascinating.
Yeah,
it makes it really engrossing.
Yeah, and I wonder I'm definitely intrigued to know how the modern game handles this. I'm looking forward to dabbling in that, because I assume, especially because it's a sim, you can lose it, lose at the game. But this is just very, just like I said, just very unforgiving. To your point, you just have no way of keeping track of how badly you are doing with, I guess I'll say, your overall macro resources. It's like, well, I have this many soldiers left, total, and this much money, and eventually you might run out of money, I assume. Like, if you are making a lot of bad decisions, you could run out of money, and it's like, I wonder if there's a failure condition if you do run out of money. That would be interesting to test. But say it doesn't.
I don't think so. I think then you'd just be resource strapped and unable maybe to outfit your soldiers, for example.
Yeah, it's just
or just re-equip. If you had to buy another Sky Ranger 2 or 3 times, you'd obviously be failing a lot of missions, and people would be pulling support, and you'd end up losing just because no one had any confidence in your ability.
Yeah. The failure condition that I saw earlier, the explicit one, was triggered by them pulling, all the countries pulling funding, basically. It didn't let me, they didn't pull funding and then let me continue playing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And just
basically said, this experience, yes, we'll do our own thing. Every country will deal with it in its own way.
Yeah.
Instead of making this international force. The alien version of Interpol.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I had a rough session this time. This whole 3-hour session I spent in one terror mission, my first terror mission. So that is why I'm barely getting out of January. So, and I definitely will admit I'm doing a little save scumming here and there. And I've kind of gotten myself a bit into a corner by the end of the mission. I think I maybe have one or 2 aliens left, though they keep surprising me. This mission, I don't know, man, 10 aliens so far, and 2 of those were the big walker things.
Right.
And I brought, the opening was actually pretty awesome, because the way that it was laid out, the Sky Ranger, back was facing a a house, and one of those four-legged walker things was right in front of the house, facing the Sky Ranger. And so I started the mission with everyone looking directly at it, and they're already in view of each other. And so I just moved my rocket launcher guy a little bit down the ramp and just shot it right at the thing. Nice. Blew up the area and one additional alien floater, and just lucked out. And I brought the rocket launcher hoping that I would be able to use it for something like that. So that was an awesome opening because it was just super situated. I don't know if I assume that it would have shot into the Sky Ranger if it had gotten to its turn.
They don't shoot.
Oh, they don't? What do they do?
They run up and bash you.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
The second one I found didn't get close enough, so I haven't experienced that yet, I guess.
Right.
I guess
I've lost a few soldiers to those things, and basically they run up and they bite you or something. I've had a number of different effects happen. Those floating saucer things that I've described previously on the last cast, they can actually do mind things to your soldiers,
like psionics.
So I'm not. Well, they can make. They explicitly made one of my guys panic.
Yeah, right.
And he dropped his weapon and his grenade in the street, and then took off running. And when I finally got back control of him, I had to get him all the way back to where his weapon was, so he could pick it up again. So that was entertaining. I've had them also take over. This was in my other playthrough. I had him take over a guy, so he became an alien agent.
Oh.
Through mind control, I guess. And he started firing on... He shot 2 guys before I got to take him down.
Oh, serious?
Like, are you kidding me? So yeah. I've lost 3 soldiers from this one attack.
Yeah. Okay, I've heard of those guys. I don't remember what they're called, but yeah, they're like the worst because they take your guys from you and then, yeah.
And turn them on you. Anyway, I think we should talk about the terror missions a little bit more depth, and maybe the differences in the tile sets and things like that. One of the things we talked about last session was that there are these sort of tiles that are put down next to each other. They appear to be randomly selected, and one of them, of course, is your start tile. That is not always in the same place relative to the other tiles. Sometimes it's in the center of the map. Sometimes it's in a corner. Usually it's not near the top, I think, because then you'd be just coming out to emptiness. So usually towards the bottom of the map or the south of the map, and then you get all these farm-based tiles with wheat or tiles with gardens or corn rows, and I don't know, I've seen other, of course, the farmhouses and things like that. And all those feel like discrete units. It's possible that there's some procedural generation with the buildings themselves. They feel like it, maybe?
I haven't seen that yet. I've noticed patterns only with most of them, where I'm entering buildings that I've been in before, and they're situated the same way. But I'm not positive on that.
Okay. Yeah, and there's a big difference then when you go to one of these terror missions, which are the ones that take place in the cities, where now you have various city tiles. You have city buildings, warehouses, and you have markets, and not a lot of open space. So it's more... street level warfare.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more narrow passageways, lots of places where you might just encounter, come around a corner and, I'm out of time units, and now I'm faced with one of those brutes or something like that, and what are you going to do? Or somebody fires on you when it comes around a corner to take the opportunity fire at you.
Really, really tough to navigate.
And then my favorites are the gas stations, which...
oh yeah, you're right. You mentioned that yesterday, or at the other one, other session. But there's no gas station in this one that I've seen so far.
Oh, okay, yes. And if you shoot the gas tanks, they explode.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And I think I took out my first brute in my first game that way, as I recall. And it was like right next. It was the tile north of where the ship landed, so it was something I got to do really early. Which is great. That's one of the things we didn't set out to talk about procedural generation this time, but that's one of the joys of procedural generation is when it just works. to generate a story, a little story, a player story, what have you. We've certainly talked about that in the past with respect to other games, and the water cooler chat that comes up around games, especially very systemic games. But the procedural generation does that too, and you see the same thing with like Twitter bots these days, that occasionally they just come up with something perfect where you just it makes you chuckle or laugh. I have a acquaintance who makes a lot of these, Darius Kazemi, makes a ton of Twitter bots, and he has one that just joins headlines together, and sometimes the way those headlines mash up are just amazing. And the same thing happens in procedural generation in games, that sometimes you just roll of the dice, random number generator, happen to get a nice little contained mini story. Oh, I landed my ship, I opened the door, and like you said, there was a brute right there, and I shot him with a rocket launcher before I even unloaded anybody. Yeah. And I took him out. Or in my case, I came down the ramp and there was a gas station and there's a thing standing right next to the pump, and instead of shooting him, I shot the pump and the whole thing went up. Mm-hmm. And those are just wonderful moments. And procedural generation is an engine for generating wonderful moments. And if you're not getting enough of them, then as a designer, you should consider how to tune to have more of them, or abandon it altogether.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, I haven't worked on a procedurally generated game before, but talking to friends who have and such, and playing them, of course, like it's fascinating to me, to your point, the tuning of it, or the weighting of them, because it's hard to say how much. I haven't noticed any weighting patterns in this game yet, but you need to make sure that there's some sort of. I'm trying to think if you've worked on anything like that before, so maybe how it's technically done. But there's definitely a rule set to the procedural generation that needs to be weighted and tuned, as you said, and to make sure that the balance of the maps is somewhat fair and interesting, because you don't want two streets next to each other, paralleled next to each other, because it doesn't make any sense. So you have to have a bunch of algorithms in there, I assume, that makes that all work right. And I mean, it's the other side of the tile set that I wanted to talk about was really just the state of the somewhat based on the level design itself, which is coming from the procedural generation, but also each square on the grid, because it's basically a grid-based system, has different states to it, both being on fire, being smoky, destroyed, and then some things you can, like hay bales, you can climb on top of, exposing yourself, but it means you can go over them, but then fences and rock walls you have to go around or try to destroy. And I've just been, and then of course many walls and doors and windows can be destroyed. Many objects inside of houses, like a sofa or something like that, can be used for cover, but then they also can be destroyed by damage. And this terror mission that I'm finishing now, the whole town is wrecked. I mean, it is a mess. I've shot 3 rockets myself. They have both stumbled upon their own grenades and blown themselves up, as well as thrown grenades at me and blown up buildings. I think there's maybe 2 pedestrians alive at this point. I mean, it is a complete disaster. And I got to hand it to him that the tile set really supports it, and the grid, each square in the grid, even like a street. The asphalt of a street can be destroyed, and it'll leave a little crater, so it's got this sense of persistence when you're done with the mission, where it really exhibits like you said, the story of what happened, and you remember when this whole side of this house blew up because they threw a grenade at you or something, I mean, it's really the depth of, and then there's also the different levels, right, where you have the different elevation levels. As a quick anecdote, I noticed this time that the floaters seem to be able to float up to a second level.
Yes. I've seen that.
Which I didn't realize because sometimes they'll be within view, but they won't be on the level that you're on. So you have to scale, rise up one level on the grid to see them, which is cool. And they're also silent. So the enemy design we'll probably get into later as we meet more of them. I want to talk more deeply about that. But anyway, the grid patterns and the level design sort of algorithms in there are really fascinating and has a lot more depth than I realized.
Yes, I'm basically any shot you take might leave a mark on the environment, and either by killing an enemy and leaving its corpse there, which will just happen forever, although some things do explode if you hit them enough. And as you note, the destruction. I don't know why they're going to spend any more money on the XCOM force after we've been through, because they're going to have to spend an awful lot of money rebuilding their town. It's like a superhero game, right? Or a superhero movie where after the big showdown, you've got to imagine the pain in the neck it is to put Metropolis back together again. But yeah, as you say, there is basically a visual story of how did I get here, and if you were able to afterwards trace through, you could tell yourself the story. It would be an easy way to remember how things happened and in what order.
Yeah,
and it's written right there in the art.
In my terror mission, when the hidden movement, turns were going for the aliens, they definitely were hunting down civilians. Like they would go. Yes. They would leave.
Heard a lot more screaming this time.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. They would leave me and kind of run away and go into a house that was farther away, and they would go upstairs and you just hear screams after scream. So they definitely have that as part of their AI. And I feel like, I don't know if this was accidental or what, but not in the terror mission, but in the ground mission I had done before this, when I'd gone into their base, and it was basically just the sectoids on that mission, and there were a lot more of them though, and they had also retreated into the bridge of the ship. Mm-hmm. But one of them seemed to have run out of the door with a grenade and just kind of blew up. So I don't know if it was just the timing of everything, or if they have kind of a suicide bomber kind of AI or something weird like that.
I suspect it's probably more like they prime it, but the priming can fail.
Yeah, maybe, or they primed it with not enough seconds,
right.
And then just the timing of it. So he blew my guy up, but he blew himself up as well. Oh. And then those UFOs have some sort of core in the middle of them, and I wonder what that's all about. Have you gone to the center of one of those UFOs?
Yes, and I think what that is effectively the dilithium crystals or what have you that power the thing, because I think that's what exploded. Remember in a mission before I explained how
there was
apparently radiation, and I think that was just
smoke or
damage,
fire.
Smoke, fire, whatever. It's not really clear. I think it's probably meant to be smoke. Although it does spread, but it does propagate around, so it's hard to know exactly what that is. It's probably in the manual, telling you what that is.
I wonder if that's explosive as well, so you could accidentally maybe blow it up and then blow the whole thing up.
Oh man.
And the one that I'm talking about was the one that had landed. I had one of their UFOs just landed without me destroying it, and so that makes sense that it would still be intact. There's just a lot of they just put a bunch of systems together, mixed them all together in this game that I just fully did not get far enough in my earlier playthroughs to see the depth of all that stuff. It's just really impressive. I can totally see why this is such a beloved game. It is just intense. And we have just scratched the surface. I'm, 8-9 hours in.
Yeah, I think I am 12.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, you've gotten with your new playthrough, you mean, or
no, all together. Yeah.
Yeah, I dread if I'm going to have to start over at some point if I lose. I'll have to see if I can recover. I'm doing okay. I have a few soldiers who have ranked up a bit, but a couple of them died in this terror mission, so I'm just going to let them stay dead.
Yes. I've been mostly doing that, unless I do something where I didn't understand the rules.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Usually when those things happen, or if something just goes so catastrophically bad, then I'm like, well, I could start over, or I could restart this mission, and I've done that. I think this is when I saved Singapore, which was my second terror mission in this second game. I had the first one go. I think 11 people died, and one person was running in panic, so that wasn't recoverable. I mean, in theory, if that person got under control, I could go back to the Sky Master and take off and still have, or the Sky Ranger, and still have it, and at least not have that expense, but have a whole new squad. I think the thing that I was a little bit happier about in this second playthrough is that I had more ground missions where I had downed UFOs or landed UFOs, and so I had time to have encounters. I think I had 3 of those, whereas in the prior one I only had 1 before I had a terror mission. So having more opportunity to go and effectively level people was really helpful. I did, in my original playthrough, have a tank, and I couldn't figure out how to get it onto the ship. It would say that you don't have enough rockets, and apparently there's some minimum number that if you don't have enough of those at all, you don't get to take the tank. You can't. So I don't know what that number is. I'll probably have to look it up. See if it might be in the manual. But at that point, I decided to abandon anyway, so I didn't worry about it. But yeah, crazy interesting game. It's funny. It's such a mix of the procedural content and also all the handwritten content, basically the progression, the tech trees, for example, and all the enemy design and things like that, because they follow their own rules. They may throw in some random mix or some table-driven mix to actually determine what's in a level, but what's fantastic is how those two things interact and manage to maintain that tension throughout. It's and I'd say the weapon and equipment design as well is pretty cool. You know what I mean? Combining that with the sort of damage types, and I assume there's probably some damage types happening in the background as well that might be more effective against certain things. You know, I feel like plasma versus laser versus what have you, and that's at
why
some point we'll have psionics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's crazy. That's why I'm hoping that I haven't finished the research on the metal on the alien alloy, but that's why I'm hoping that might be an armor related, because then maybe potentially it's better against their plasma bolts or something like that.
Right.
But I'm making that up in my head and hoping for the best.
Yeah, in the base management I have built a lot more than you have. I think I built some storage facilities. I built additional radar dishes. I built an alien containment facility.
Oh yeah, I finally had one of those happen, but I didn't have one, so the alien died. But yeah, tell me about. I was going to ask you about your base stuff because you're way farther ahead on bases than I am. So
right, so I did all of that, but mostly at the beginning it was mostly just in response. Well, it was partially in response to what you said about the radars last time. So I wanted to make sure I had enough to be tracking down these events as they were happening. But then with the alien containment, I had also had a level where I had caught a alien but couldn't bring it back alive without an alien containment facility. So this new playthrough, I wanted to make sure I had one of those. Basically, I spent myself pretty far down in my bank account in the month of January in the expectation that in the second month I would be better poised to serve the world's needs and maybe get more money paid in. And that paid off in Russia. They gave a ton more money, like $500,000 more, when I saved Novovirodsk, whatever that town was called, and similarly with Singapore, but China was not happy with how I did. I think I must have missed some UFOs, so I've now built a second base in Central Asia, hopefully to get that half of the planet and with radars and things like that. And the way the building works is you can only build adjacent to an existing structure. So I was able to build 4 new buildings immediately after you place basically the access elevator, I think they call it. Mm-hmm, it's basically the access point. It's the core of the base. You can put it anywhere on this grid that you want, and then you can build up to 4 additional things around it, because once you've done that, you can't build anymore because you have no more places adjacent to existing buildings. So I built a hangar, and that's building. It takes almost a month to build a hangar. I built a radar facility there. What else did I build there? I think I built a laboratory and living quarters so that I could get some science going on there.
And they're all finished? They're all complete?
No. I've just placed them.
You just placed them, and then,
And I have a long time to wait for the hangar. The other ones are more like 5 days, 10 days, something like that. So those will be coming online pretty quickly. But I won't have a fully functioning base until the end of March, basically.
Mm-hmm. Man.
But so much stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really look forward to more of the researching. I only have a few things in progress. That also, well, I'm still not out of January, so who knows? Like I'm moving so slowly because I guess I've just been doing too many ground missions or something, so I'm just not progressing very quickly that way. But none of my research is finished, so I'm not really benefiting from any of that stuff. But I guess that's maybe okay because I'm not out of January yet, but I
had some research fail, actually. I was researching laser pistols, and they said, "Oh, it's complete." And I went and looked, and they're like, "Yeah, we didn't learn anything." I'm like,
oh no!
So do it again, I guess. And
oh no!
And so, I mean, I have them now, but it basically got to a point where it's like, "Oh yeah, you spent your time, and we've got nothing to show for it." Science, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I mean, they kind of have status next to the research, like unknown or good or whatever. And like, it's probably in the manual. I haven't read that part yet, but it's hard to know what that means and what there's not like a timer on it or something. So
right, there are no timers. Those are the sorts of things that I would expect. Maybe the more modern version puts front center, showing you exactly what's going on, so you can make better decisions. Yeah. Because it makes it difficult to plan your strategy when the outcomes can be so varied. And you really don't have an opportunity to do anything. You don't know that it's going to go so poorly that you're going to lose any benefit. If I had known that, I would have put more researchers on it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering is what the variable is there. Is it what each scientist you put on it, what it does? Does it up the success rate, or does it up the time, or both, or what it is, So, and maybe it's in the manual. I haven't read that section yet, but what have you been naming your bases?
Oh, I've been naming them after cheeses.
Of course. Oh, good. Well, I haven't built a second.
In fact, that's the first one. Well, Gouda. So.
Okay, that's hilarious. What's your second one?
My second one was Edam.
Oh, very specific
Dutch
cheese.
Edam cheese. Oh yeah.
Good.
I'm sure I'll have a cheddar at some point, and I don't know. We'll see what else I go for.
How far you go? Yeah, I mean, eventually
how many bases I have.
Yeah, I mean, I assume all those, each of those slots for the bases need to be in each of the continents, the main continents. That'll probably fill it. How many were there? 7? Are there 7 slots, you said?
Seven or 8, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I named my first, I only have the one, but I named my first one Duville, so.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So when it gets invaded and destroyed, you'll have a little party.
Or when a recruit joins up, they're like, such and such recruit has joined, is joined Duville. Yeah, it's funny, hilarious.
Well done.
Uh-huh.
All right, well, with that, why don't we take a quick break, and we'll come back and do a little feedback and talk about next time.
Sounds good.
welcome back from the break. We'll talk about what we're going to do next time, which is going to be a little bit of a departure. And first, we want to make sure we hit some reviews and stuff. You have an email. I don't recall who from, but you have the first one.
From Ryan.
Yes.
Yeah, we have an explanation on the Monty Haul problem. Hey, guys. I can't not write in after you mentioned the Monty Haul problem on the last podcast. As a statistician, and educator, I feel obligated to try and give you conceptual understanding on what is going on. There is a subtle trick that is being played with the framing of this problem, and it is caused by using only 3 doors. We are naturally inclined to think of the situation as we chose 1 door. The host shows us a non-prize that was behind one of the other 2 doors, then asks if you want to switch your doors or not. What is really happening can be thought of as the reverse of that. We are picking a door, and the host shows us what is behind all the rest of the doors, but the one we chose, and another door. I don't know if I'm really reading that appropriately, but
no, I think you got it. Mm-hmm. It'll be a lot clearer with this example.
Okay, so let me make that statement a bit clearer with an example. Imagine instead of 3 doors to choose from, there are 1,000. 999 have non-prizes, and the other has the prize. You pick a door. The host then opens 998 doors, revealing what was behind them, all of which do not have the prize. She then asks if you want to switch or stay with your initial choice. We know for certain the prize is behind one of the 2 unopened doors, your initial choice, or the only other unopened door, which is more likely true, that the prize is behind the one in 1,000 doors you randomly picked initially, or the prize is behind the only one remaining door that the host did not open after she eliminated 998 wrong choices. Given that setup, I think it is much clearer that the best strategy is to always switch. But if that didn't make sense, it can be shown empirically that always switching is best. Imagine the prize is behind door number 3. Okay, and so he breaks it down into some bullet points and a list. If you choose to stick with your original choice, here are the 3 possible outcomes. The first one, you choose door 1. Host shows you door 2. You stay with door 1 and lose. Number 2, you choose door number 2. Host shows you door 1. You stay with door 2 and lose. And then the third one, you chose door 3, host shows you either door 1 or 2, and you stay, and then you win. If you choose to switch, here are the 3 possible outcomes. The first one, with door 1, host shows you 2, door 2, you switch to 3 and win.
Right.
And then the second one, 2, of course. Door 2
versus door 1, and also switch to 3 and win. And if you choose door 3... if you happen to choose correctly, you lose.
Right. I think I get it. Yeah.
One of the things I liked about this, and it bears on game design, so bear with me for a second,
okay,
is that Ryan is giving us 2 different ways of thinking about this problem or explaining this problem. And therefore it will make sense to more people because there's 2 ways of understanding the same data.
Right.
And we often do that in games. There are multiple channels for the same information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In order for players who are not connecting with one way of understanding what they're seeing, giving them another way to see that same information. So it's good design generally.
Mm-hmm.
We often design things with color and then have to do something else as well for people who are colorblind. Do a shape, for example. So I like that. And it also does, of course, explain the Monty Haul problem, as he put it in quotes, which is I do actually understand the Monty Haul problem. I have gone through this in the past myself, but I know it is one that tends to give people fits.
Yeah, it's funny. The same. I don't know if it. I assume it was not the same Ryan. He may have listened to both podcasts. I don't know. But somebody wrote into Giant Beastcast and basically gave the same example with the putting it in context.
Now we're finding channels. We're not only finding channels of information and different ways of presenting it. We're also presenting it on different podcasts. So
exactly.
2 different ways to get to.
There's a collective subconscious of this is going on right now across multiple gaming podcasts somehow, and I think that's hilarious. But yeah, it's the psychology. I mean, to your point about game development, like psychology is a big part of, and in fact, teams are hiring psychologists more and more these days because it's a discipline that we have either not even thought of or taken for granted when it comes to player psychology, right. And the Monty Haul problem is really just playing upon people's assumptions and perceptions about a thing versus what the reality of the statistics actually are.
Right.
Great. That's why the game show works so well.
Right. A great book that I can recommend to folks. I think it's by Kalman. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. Works through a lot of sort of psychological stuff about how we reason about things. Huh. Terrific book, and I'd recommend it to folks. Anyway, I will now read the second email. This is from Bobby Oster, from whom we've heard from before. I think maybe in 2 different, I think he's emailed before as well. Anyway, he says, "Hey, Brett and Tim, although I know you don't always read the email. I've now clawed my way through the entire back catalog of episodes and have thoroughly enjoyed them. It was also great to hear you recently read my review during the Planescape Torment episodes. My iTunes name is Kirk Peterman, for anyone going home. So in this case, that was not his real name. Tim mentioned it on the first episode of the XCOM series, but I wanted to reiterate that Final Fantasy Tactics is also a classic when it comes to the tactical, turn-based strategy genre. While definitely not the first game to come out in the genre, released in Japan was 97 and US 98, it really does an excellent job of refining a lot of the elements that the genre is well known for. Unit customization, probability-based combat, permadeath, and in this case, an epic narrative filled with political intrigue and plot twists. Also, it's now available on iOS for only $6.
Oh.
I know it's not likely you'll do another series around this genre soon, but for other listeners looking for a great game, it's definitely worth the price of admission. Yes, here. Totally agree. Yeah. I actually still have a PlayStation copy and a PlayStation 2 with backwards compatibility to play it on. Anyway,
ooh, nice.
Also, wanted to comment about how listening to the recent Super Mario World Series was a blast to hear. I'm from the generation after you guys, growing up with the NES SNES, and listening to you work your way through the game makes the 10-year-old version of me smile. I didn't remember the game being that difficult, but realized that my infinite time as a child spent honing my skills for the game must have clouded my memory. Now I realize I'm the old guy. I recently tried to pick up Bloodborne and got my way through the first boss after a massive amount of farming for levels and dying before giving up and realizing that I no longer have the time or patience required. It's also quite interesting to see how much both of your Western computer game backgrounds influence the experience you've had with games in the past. I'm definitely a computer gamer myself, rode my bike home to play modem games of Warcraft with my best friend, but I have been much more greatly impacted by Japanese games as they were such a large part of my childhood and there were so many rapid developments in a wide variety of genres during the 90s. Okay, and then last paragraph. Lastly, I'm sure your list of games to play is probably super long, but I would really love to hear you tackle a genre that's close to my heart, the narrative third-person shooter. You did do Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, which is definitely the genesis of this via Amy Hennig, as well as Half-Life, which is also similar in a lot of ways. It would be super interesting to hear your take on a game from the Uncharted series. Uncharted 2 seems like a really good candidate. I know you're a fan of the series, and it has the benefit of being time-boxed and relatively easy to complete from a difficulty perspective. Plus, it's fairly relevant with the recent release of Lost Legacy. Thanks for keeping to put out one of my favorite podcasts and bringing awesome insights to older classics. Best, Bobby. Okay, a lot of stuff in there.
Mm-hmm. Oof.
Yes, so Final Fantasy Tactics is a game I've played through a couple of times. I love that game. It is available on iOS, and that is amazing. And I understand it's the It's adapted from not the Vita, but what was before the Vita? That other
The PSP.
the PSP. It's adapted from the PSP version, so it has a lot of usability tune-ups and things like that. So it's quite a good version of the game, maybe the best version of the game.
Yeah, that's cool that it's on iOS. That's one I missed, as with all the other Final Fantasies. But man, was everyone at work talking about that game when it came out. I mean, it definitely seems to be a classic. I'd definitely love to do it. It'd be good to play a Western turn-based tactical and an Eastern turn-based tactical at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of great ones in the Japanese development scene. I'm thinking like Ogre Battle on the N64. I think it was called Ogre Battle 64, as I recall. And
it was. Yeah.
And another one that
I did play the Advance Wars games and love those.
Oh, those are fantastic.
I didn't play all of them, but I think I played the first 2 or so, and those are really good, man.
Yep. Yeah, there needs to be one of those on the Switch.
Yeah.
I would play a lot of that. They'll just have to find some way of switching the units because they always do something like that. It was the first one, and then it was Dual Strike on the DS.
Right.
So anyway, and then what else was I going to pick? I think so on the Uncharted thing. I think it may be a little too recent for us. We're really trying to find the games that something like Uncharted was based on, rather than the more modern take on it. But in 10 years, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I think for better or for worse, we're going to have to play one of the early Tomb Raiders.
Yep.
As much as I would both love and hate that. But it's, as far as legacy goes, building up to that, I think that would be an important one to start with, and then tracking that along the way. And we'll eventually get to Uncharted for sure. And I think 2 would end up being the right one to play. But yeah, down the road.
Oh, I'm gonna call an audible here. I just realized we had another piece of email that came in today. It's short, but it bears on what we just heard. Oh no! It's actually a review. Let me find the review. It's a review from a while ago, and it's it's not. Okay, I'm sorry. I misremembered. Go ahead and do with your airplane.
The second one?
Yeah, go ahead and do the second one with your airplane.
Okay, yeah, that's perfectly timed airplane. From Eric Shields, nice article from Kotaku via Reddit. Hi guys, thought you might enjoy this article from the other day about how game devs trick players for the players' benefit. He sends a link, which I'm sure Brett will put in the show notes. I highlighted a couple of entries I found relevant to your cast. Also, can you share any such examples from your past? So,
these are the examples. Yep.
The 2 examples he highlighted: Half-Life 1. If facing more than 2 enemies, only 2 would actually attack. The rest would run to random locations and bark lies, i.e., flanking. That's a good one. Yeah. And then the second one was from the Bureau XCOM, and that is the shooter.
Yes, that's the XCOM shooter by 2K Marin.
Yes, who ironically the enemy AI designer I work with currently. The enemy AI gets more aggressive if the players don't move every 15 to 20 seconds. I wonder if something similar occurs in the XCOM you're playing now. Yeah, this is a good topic that I probably won't be able to think of a good one. But
I found this via Twitter. I know there was then a Reddit thread, but it somehow came into my feed. It was asked by a young woman. I think she may be Australian. Apologies if I'm getting that wrong. I should track that down because it's probably still in my mentions. People keep favoriting and stuff. Yes, Jennifer Shirley. And she's in Melbourne. The one that I gave was from Republic Commando, and the thing that we did with the Trandoshans to make them seem smarter. And I don't know if you remember this, but I basically so we had originally the design had called for an enemy Trandoshan squad that was going to be the equivalent of the player squad and sort of a a boss enemy, but that you kept encountering. And we really didn't have the time or ability to get that working. So what we did instead was, in situations where there were multiple Trandoshans, when a Trandoshan would make a decision of what he was going to do next, basically come up with a plan for his actions. All the AIs did this all the time. That was how they worked. I'm going to move up and find cover, or what have you, or I'm going to shoot from here, or I'm going to throw a grenade. They'll make a decision, but it's all independent. None of the AIs work together in any way. So what we did was we had, when an enemy would make a decision, he would basically write it to a bit of memory that any AI could look at. And another AI would look at that and then point or yell, or point and yell, in order to make it seem like that was the leader and telling someone to do something, and that they were working together in some way. When in fact, it was working the other way around, where a thing had decided to do a thing, and we just made it look like somebody had told him to. And that was a really easy thing to do, to do a sort of smoke and mirrors effect.
No, I did not remember that at all. That's a great one.
And
Good
then
idea.
the second one, that was actually my idea. And I had Nathan Martz implement it. He was like, "Oh, that's great. We could totally do that. Easy." And then the other one I thought of but didn't put on Twitter, so that's podcast exclusive, was in both the Starfighter games. The enemy AI deliberately overleads the player when they first target him. So that you have the sensation of bullets whizzing by, or lasers, whatever, whizzing by your heads.
Yeah, right.
And you have time to respond. So when the AI was originally implemented, it just shot you. And how you learned you were being shot was that mostly you died. So that wasn't any fun. And it didn't really feel like the fights feel like in the movies. So instead I had it deliberately lead the player, and then that would track back towards you over a certain period of time. So if you didn't do anything, you would get shot. So you had the opportunity to jink or pull up to try to turn on the target yourself. So
yeah, those are good ones. I do remember that one. That was, that's almost like influenced by the film's kind of decision, where you want that sense that things are flying by you, but because you, of course, in your tech, you could make them surgically hit the player fine, right? Because just through physics, through math, and of course that's not what you actually want to have happen for the player. As far as I can't think. I've been racking my brain as you were talking about any other additional tricks from other things, but nothing's coming to mind. I mean, on Republic Commando, one that we did talk a lot about that isn't really a trick, but the sort of pretty obvious in retrospect discovery of how to keep the squad in your view frustrum as much as possible.
Right.
Where it's obviously easier to have them follow you around, but then they're always behind you, so you never really get that sense that you're in a.
I think this was my idea too, actually.
It might have been, yeah. That was a good one, maybe, and you also immediately, I think we assumed that you wouldn't want them in your way while you were firing, but it just was a better sense of squad when you have them, in a fake way, kind of always emphasized.
Right. So how did we actually do it? Do you remember? Do you remember what we called it?
No, I don't remember what we called it. No, I don't.
So what the level designers had to do was place down breadcrumbs.
Yeah, I thought it was a level design solution. Yeah,
the level designers had to place down what we called breadcrumbs for the squad to follow, and basically, as the player would pass, if the player turned around and started going back the other way, the squad would know because the player would pass an old breadcrumb, and so that would give the squad the understanding of what direction the player was going, and so the squad would go back and catch up to the player, and they would actually move faster when they weren't visible, I think. And then they would pass you on the way to the next breadcrumb, and then if you turned around again, so there was basically one path that they would follow through the whole level.
Yeah. Yeah, it only worked because it was a linear game. So, yeah, good topic though. I'll have to look at that article.
Yeah, that was a tough problem. Yeah, check out the show notes. That'll definitely be in there. Yes, there was a Kotaku article which has a few examples, and then there was a Reddit thread which I believe was in this email we just. Oh no, he sent the Kotaku thing. So yes, I think the link might be in the Kotaku article as well. So yes, it's all smoke and mirrors. Usually the enemies are not as smart as they seem. In fact, you don't really want them to be good at what they do all the time, because it's less fun that way.
Yeah, I mean, AI is the area that obviously all these examples, almost all of them are from AI. The other area that I feel like a lot of fudging and tricks happen is with physics, to make sure that physics are fun and working for you and not always against you. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
like a warthog that's flipping over or tumbling. You kind of want it to land on its tires as much as possible sometimes.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Or buoyancy, in Tomb Raider's case, buoyancy that kind of edges the thing you need toward the thing where you need to put it. You know what I mean?
Exactly, right. Give you a little help.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to be fighting the physics, as we say.
Yeah.
You want to be able to go with the flow in that case. I think we can fit in one more, and then I think we'll call it. I have the last one. No, did I just read that? No, this is the last one here. It's from Andrew, if that is your real name. Actually, he's written before, and in his signature he says it is still his real name. Resurgence of turn-based tactical games. Hey guys, you were talking about the resurgence of turn-based tactical and strategy games, and you got me thinking about my other hobby of board games. Thinking about the last few years, I think there's been a parallel rise in popularity. Board games are in vogue right now, and he gives a whole bunch of links.
Yeah,
and video games with board game-like mechanics are popping up regularly too. And he lists XCOM, Mario and Rabbids, Hearthstone, and other card games like it. Pit People, Transistor, Armello, and Antihero, and I'm sure there are many more. Even from the outside of both industries, I know there's some cross-pollination. There was a board game day at GDC with an accompanying board game play space, and going the other direction, XCOM, the board game, actually feels very video game-like, with an app to time different aspects of the game and generally make your life pain. From your inside perspective, how much cross-pollination is actually happening? Andrew, still my real name. So one of the things I'd say about that is that board games are only rising in popularity in English-speaking nations. They've always been popular in Germany, for example, since I mean the Spiel des Jahres, which is the board game's Oscar, has been going since the mid to late 70s, like 78 or something like that. I have the first one, Hare and Tortoise, and have several others of them. I think they really started to rise to prominence, those types of deep strategy board games, again, in the U.S. with maybe Settlers of Catan, which would have been the mid-90s, but certainly over the last 15 years, board games have been going crazy.
Carcassonne,
that's another one that I believe is a Spiel des Jahres winner. We actually have a friend who designed Quirkle, and so that's awesome. And we worked with her husband, so that's Susan McKinley Ross and Chris Ross, who worked at LucasArts with both of us, although never on one of our projects, I don't think. Anyway.
The cross-pollination, it's definitely out there, I think, and it's hard with some genres, of course. The one kind of tangential genre of games that I'd bring up that had a lot of big influence is D&D over the different editions. I'd say it went through, I think it was was it third edition? It might have been fourth edition that kind of was, I would say, MMOified.
It was a fourth edition, yes.
Fourth edition kind of was heavily influenced by WoW and other, you played that edition and you saw the rule set being influenced by video games very explicitly, I'd say. And the streamlined how streamlined it was compared to previous editions. And then kind of with 5th edition, they're trying to come back, to some of the tradition there. But I mean, as far as like any turn-based kind of tactical game, definitely influenced. Trying to think of a good example though. Then the XCOM game is a hilarious one because it's sort of like now the board game is is pulling from the video game and then vice versa, and it's kind of gone round and round. And as we talked about in our first episode, XCOM's influenced originally by board games. So
one of the things I'd love to see more influence from in terms of board games is theming. Because we have a tendency in video games to have a very few number of influences. And this is less true in the last decade or so with the rise of independent development. And so it's less true now than it has ever been since maybe the 80s. But in general, I would say there are fewer themes in video games than there are in board games. I have a very large collection of board games, and while there are things that are derived from cyberpunk and so Blade Runner or something like that, or Star Wars, or the other handful of movies that seem to have influenced every game developer, there are also games where you're collecting gems or art or fighting disease across the world or
farming.
Building a farming or building a medieval town, Carcassonne, as you mentioned before. And the wide variety of themes that are there is something I would love to see more of.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I feel like the indie video game scene is trying to do much more of that than the AAA space.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's just a money thing. Board games are not super cheap, but they are a lot cheaper to develop than video games are. So the AAA video games are. So they are expensive products, but that's more a factor of the market and being able to support creators, because there are still relatively few people playing board games.
Without a good example, unfortunately, I can't think of a specific example. I will say that many of the popular board games, and then when a new good one, like I don't know, Pandemic Legacy or something like that comes out, it is heavily discussed and talked about and analyzed at work, in my day-to-day, whether it be a lot of the designers and programmers and stuff are playing them. We play them at lunch. There's a couple board game groups at work, and so everyone's, again, I don't have a specific example of something that influenced, but the sort of like the thing that's cool about board games is it really the distillation of the mechanics and the systems into, a digestible, usually pretty elegant, design. And I think that really a lot of designers appreciate that about them. That's why we play them. And I don't play them enough myself, but they definitely come up in day-to-day speak. So,
and then one final plug I'll put out there is for the Jackbox Party Pack, which is a collection of things that we would normally find as social board games. So things like Pictionary or Trivial Pursuit, with
apples to apples,
or apples to apples, with quirky twists, as you would expect from Jackbox, who made. They're the people who made You Don't Know Jack back in the late 90s, something like that, early aughts. So they are collections of games. You can get them on Steam. There's 3 party packs, I think, and they have five games in each. And players participate by using their phones. So it's all digital and video game. You can play it on your Steam PC, and then everybody plays on their phone connected to a web interface. It's really quite terrific.
Very good. Yeah, we forgot to mention that when you visited. You introduced my family and I to it, and it's very, very good. We definitely have to get it.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that one. Okay, I think we'll call the feedback there, and we'll get to the reviews next time. As always, you can send an email to devgameclub@gmail.com, and of course, we'd love to read and discuss. Thank you for those. So for next time, we are actually going to do that rarest of things and take a break from the podcast for a week. Tim and I are both traveling and it's basically making it impossible for us to. We'll have time each to play, I think. While I'm traveling, he'll be able to play, and while he's traveling, I'll be able to play, but we won't have a lot of time to actually get on the phone together and talk. I will be in Galway, Ireland, the weekend where we would normally record this. And so we're going to put up something next week that is just maybe a conversation or two. It depends on how much time I have to do it, but a conversation or two from our past interview segments, which are typically quite long. We were kicking some around about things that we, people we talked to and what they talked about might tie in a little bit. So if you haven't listened to the interviews in the past, they are a part of our podcast that we really, really enjoy ourselves, and we think it's a really great addition to the cast to be able to talk to folks, and we hope you enjoy that. If you have listened to them before, well, sorry. See us in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I guess we should talk about what we're doing for after that, because I'm not going to add a stinger for that to the next one.
Oh, yeah. So, well, yeah, I mean, back to
I think we'll try to play as much as we can and see where we are. And you'll just have to listen in on Twitter, maybe, to figure out where we're getting to. I
mean, if you are playing along, I think in this case, because of the genre, it's fine if we're all on different pages, really, because I think it's just such a
I don't think it's possible to be on the same page.
Yeah, I think it's just such a wide range, which is a good thing. I think it's the water cooler stories that we've been telling have been hilarious and great and terrifying and depressing and fun. So it's like, maybe write in with some of your stories if you are playing along or if you've played before. In fact, we had that one already about that great sniper shot. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we may extend the podcast to 5 episodes. We definitely want to finish a whole game of XCOM, get to the end and suit up and go to Mars. So we will see how it goes next time. We will, as I said, both have time to play and hopefully get in a bunch of hours. We should probably target quite a few hours to try to get a sense of whether we're in striking distance of the end. But we'll see how it goes. All right. Yep. In the meantime, you can find me at Brett_Duville on Twitter and him at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
And, of course, you can find the podcast at DevGameClub. Shoot us an email at devgameclub@gmail.com or rate and review us on iTunes/Apple Podcasts. Those really do help us reach new listeners and keeps us going, as do your emails. So thanks so much for those who have. And for now, good night.
Good night.